I don't care how late you stay out. Stay out as late as you want. You want to borrow the new car? You want to borrow my credit card? Kids today, they really have it rough.
I have no idea where we are or where we're going.
I mean, when I was their age, life was easy. Super easy. Why haven't you gotten a tattoo yet? How come you don't have any piercings yet?
Yep, we're lost. We are completely lost.
Ooh, sports.
Just do whatever the mechanic says to do.
Vehicle maintenance is completely overrated.
Look, whatever the mechanic is asking, just pay him. Pay him whatever he wants.
I wish they had soap operas at night. I like that boy. You should date him. You should date him immediately.
Well, what about the creepy guy with the motorcycle? He's cute.
Yeah, sure. Spring break in Tahiti sounds fun. Hey, make sure you get all your video games done before you start your homework. You don't have to pass all your classes.
What? You have a project due tomorrow and you've known about it for 4 weeks and you haven't started yet? Sweet! Doesn't anybody want to know if we're there yet?
Remember, if you need anything between midnight and 4 a.m., please come wake me up. Hey, I'm on the phone. Could you bring the baby over and let him climb all over me?
Hey, can you please turn that music up? Well, we just stopped for lunch 10 minutes ago, but yeah, let's stop again. I never have trouble with my toddler.
I never have trouble with my teenagers.
I never have trouble with my adult children.
You know, she's right. We are ruining her life. Yes, more homework to correct.
All right, whining.
Yay, tantrums. Vomit.
We just really need to spoil these kids more.
Sorry, buddy. I don't know any good jokes at all. You're 16. You pretty much know everything now. I think 18's a great age to get married.
Okay, remember, make sure you turn on all the lights before you leave the house.
Hey, could you leave the front door open for a couple hours? Thanks.
Whoa! Money really does grow on trees.
Hi, welcome to Family Life Center. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us. I want to say Happy Father's Day to all of our fathers out there. As a token of our appreciation, we have a gift for you after the service, so make sure you pick that up. If you're joining us online, you're not going to miss out. So you can just simply email info@familylifecenter.us and just put in the subject line Father, and we'll make sure we send out your gift to you. Here are your weekly announcements. Life groups have now started their summer session, so we have 5 life groups that have started, and it's not too late to join. In fact, I encourage you to join one of our life groups. So how do you do that? Well, first, make sure you've downloaded the Church Center app. Select Family Life Center as your church, and then click the tab that says Groups. You'll see that there will be some groups that you can choose from, so just look at the one that you want and then click Join. The leader will be notified that you want to be a part of the group and get connected to you. You can also go on our webpage, familylifecenter.us, and click the Life Groups tab. Of course, you can always contact the office and Martha will be able to help you out to get to a life group that you need. That's it for our announcements. As we turn our focus to praise and worship, we invite you to stand with us. Here at Family Life Center, you can stand, kneel, raise your hands, or stay seated. However you choose to worship, the important thing is to focus on God. At Family Life Center, there's 4 ways that you can give. Number 1, you can give online at familylifecenter/giving. Number 2, you can give through our app. Download our Church Center app to get started. Third way you can give is to text to give. Just text 84321 to get started. And the fourth and final way you can give is you can always mail your check to the church office. Now, if you're here at the service, we're not passing the offering plate. So at some time before, during, or after the service, just drop your gift in the giving box in the back of the sanctuary. We trust you to trust God with your finances. I think one of the most important things about marriage is to realize there are keys to making marriage work. Sometimes it seems that marriage is a conundrum, that we'll never get this thing called marriage figured out or how to get it to operate like we think it should. But when we get into the Bible, we begin to realize that there are principles that help us to synchronize with one another and help marriages to play as a team. Jesus taught us about making marriage work and some intentional ingredients in Matthew chapter 19. Now, we read this last week, but I want us to read it again as we look to expand on how to make marriage work as God intended. Remember, it's not your idea, it's not my idea, it's God's idea. So let's go to God's Word to see how He intended marriage to work. "Haven't you read," Jesus replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate.'" Now, last week, Ashley and I talked about this phrase, becoming one. Becoming is a process, and in marriage, becoming one is an intentional process that both people have a responsibility to contribute and to make happen. In short, marriage only works when we both work together toward a specific goal of becoming one. In our last session, we focused on one of the keys of making marriage work, and that was to bring God into our marriage. Today, I want us to continue with a few more keys. I'm going to give you 2 keys today. The first one is to dismiss the myth. What you believe about anything in life is extremely important because what you believe is going to determine 2 very important things. Number 1, it's going to determine your expectations, both for others and what you're going to get out of the relationship. Secondly, it's going to determine your behavior. Now, what you believe about something is going to determine what you expect from that something or someone, and what you believe also will determine how you behave towards that someone or something. So your beliefs are extremely important. Myths represent what we would call false beliefs or a false set of beliefs. When it comes to marriage, we often establish false beliefs about what marriage is and what we can expect from a marriage and how we should behave in a marriage. These false beliefs result because we haven't learned what marriage is and how God designed marriage to work. Now, these inevitably lead to expectations being violated and behavior that we'll say is not Christ-like. Today, we're going to talk about Pastor Odale Shields. He has 17 myths of marriage, but I wanted to discuss 10 of those with you today. So we're going to discuss 10 myths of marriage. Now, these are myths or false beliefs that we can adopt about our marriage because we don't really know what marriage is and how God intended it to be. Now, what are some of the most common myths about marriage that need to be permanently dismissed and deleted from our thinking? Well, number 1 is this belief and myth that marriage will make me happy. No, they will not. Marriages will not make us happy. I mean, you think that when you get married that you'll be happy, but the truth is if you're not happy now before you're married, you're not going to be happy in your marriage. Now, what does it take to have a happy marriage? Well, it takes two happy people to have a happy marriage. So you need to bring happiness into your marriage. Marriage itself will not make you happy. Now, the second myth is this, that marriage will make me whole. No, marriage will not make you whole. If you're broken in your life and you don't feel like you're a whole person, then you need to get whole before you get into marriage, because marriage isn't designed that way. It doesn't function that way to make you whole. You know, Jesus says that the two will become one. But here's the thing, it takes two whole people to make a whole marriage. You don't have to wait until you get married to feel and know that you're whole. When you get married, that spouse is not completing you. No, they're complementing you. And there's a difference. When you're completed, you feel like you have to have that thing in order to be whole. But when you're married and you have your identity in Christ, you already know that you're complete in Him. And so your spouse acts as someone to complement you and only adds to your whole person. The third myth is this: my primary job in marriage is to improve or change my spouse. No, it's not. People often think that it's my job to fix my spouse. No one gave you that job to change the other person. And so if you've been, holding that title or that job since you've been married, it's time to turn in your resignation. No one gave you that job. My primary job in my marriage is not to change my spouse, but it's to change me, to improve myself so that I can be the best version of myself that I can be for my spouse. Now, hopefully, it'll be reciprocal. Like as I invest, so my spouse will invest. But it's not my job to change her. The fourth myth is this, that great marriages never have problems or conflicts. That is a myth. It's not true. Every marriage has problems. Every marriage has conflicts. Now, if someone says that their marriage has never had any problems or conflicts, well, they have a bigger problem, and it's the problem of lying. You can have a great marriage and have some problems and some conflicts as you work together. Why is that? Because you're two different people joining as one. So you're going to have two perspectives on things, and you're going to have to figure out how to work as a team. And it's not always going to be pretty. But you can still have a great marriage and have some problems and conflicts. Now you might retort back to me, Pastor, you don't know my husband or you don't know my wife. But the issue is not that. The issue is, or you may say that I don't have a great marriage, but the issue is not that you don't have a great marriage, you have a normal marriage. It's normal marriage to have some problem and have some conflict. So we need to dispel that myth. Now the fifth myth is this, that marriage will take care of my loneliness. No, it will not cure your loneliness. I wish it were so, but marriage is not promised to cure your loneliness. Now, there is this benefit of having companionship in a marriage. And so you're going to have somebody that's around. But the dark reality of a lot of marriages is that sometimes your spouse is going to make themselves unavailable to you. And so you can be in a marriage but yet feel desperately alone. And now, I don't know which is worse, to be alone as a single or to be alone with somebody in marriage. But marriage itself is not going to cure loneliness. We have to figure out that Christ alone can help us with that sense of loneliness. The sixth myth is this: my spouse should always know my needs and meet them. Does that sound familiar? Now, a lot of us get married thinking that and expecting our spouse to just know what our needs are and happily fulfill them. But this is false thinking, and it's pervasive in a lot more marriages than we may think. The thinking goes like this: if they really love me, then they would know what I need. If they really knew me, they would know what I'm feeling. And if they knew what I'm feeling, then I wouldn't have to tell them. Now, does that sound familiar? Well, in other words, who you really wanted to marry was a mind reader. You know, it's entirely unfair to ask this of your spouse, to be able to read your mind. You can't even read your own mind half the time. You don't even know what you want half the time. So how can we expect that from the other person? So if you have this expectation and this myth that your spouse should be a mind reader, you are being a little bit ridiculous. And so we have to dispel that and dismiss that. It's just not a realistic expectation to hold of our spouse. The seventh myth, and are you still with me? I know I'm dropping some bombs today, but they're good. Now, number 7 is this: having children will make our marriage better. No, they will not. They won't. Now, people sometimes think our lives are already pretty stressed. You know what we really need? We need to have children. And I'm like, what? You know, if your life is already stressed, children, they're going to add to that. And I think I guess I need to tell you something, that kids, they represent this word responsibility, which responsibility equals more stress. So the equation is responsibility equals more stress. Now, I'm all for kids, and I think it's great to have kids. You know, we're going to be talking about parenting and kids later on in this series. So don't take this statement as anti-children. But it's false to think that children will fix or improve your marriage. It's not going to make your marriage work better. The opposite's true. Children will add a whole nother dimension of challenge to your marriage. If you had communication issues before you had children, just think about what they're going to be like when you're trying to coordinate that child's activities. And what happens when we're not prepared for children, and this is many, many people, is that kids early in marriage, when you're not prepared, can lead to what will happen as a stress fracture in the relationship. So we need to be careful with this myth that somehow having children is going to make our marriage work better. The opposite may be true too. 8th myth that I have for you is that my past doesn't affect me, or my past will always haunt me. So they're kind of like two extremes here. And we have to be aware that as you're coming into a marriage, you're bringing with you your past. I mean, there's no denying that. You can't just separate your past and into the present. But there's two extremes here. One person may believe that my past will have no effect on my present or future, and another may believe that their past will haunt them for the rest of their life, and it'll greatly affect my future. What we need to realize is that your past will affect your present, but it does not have to dictate your future. Now let me say that again. Your past will affect your present, but it doesn't have to dictate your future if you deal with your past. Now you have to deal with the issues in your life, the past relationships and stuff that you're bringing into your marriage, because it will affect your present. So it's going to have an effect, but you get to determine how much of an effect by dealing with your past in the present. The 9th myth is that men can't understand women, and women can't understand men. Now, how many of you think that this is true? Well, it's a myth. Women can understand men, and men can understand women. Now, you may say, you don't know my wife, you don't know my husband. No, it's not that. It's that we're unable to understand how the other gender processes information. And so we need to understand some of the gender differences to be able to begin to understand the opposite sex. Now, in our first year of marriage, Ashley and I were in a young marrieds group led by an older couple in our church. We learned a lot about one another in that group and how we approach information. I walked out of that study realizing I married a very, very different person than myself. And it's kind of overwhelming to think that we're so different. And how can we possibly understand one another? But one of the things that I learned over the years that I found really helpful, and maybe it'll be helpful to you, is this example of gender differences. Now, I need to warn you, this may make you hungry, or it may blow your mind, or both, I don't know. But this is something I found very helpful. You see, men process information a lot like waffles. So you could say men are waffles. Not in the sense that they waffle between decisions, but in the sense that they have boxes, compartments. Like a waffle has these boxes and compartments where syrup and butter goes into one, but not all. It may spill over, but they're kind of segmented and divided spaces in the waffle. So men are waffles. Now, for example, Ashley may say to me, we need to talk about, and then kind of talk about something. And I immediately look for the point of reference, that box that I need to put this in. Where's she directing my attention? And there are times, I must admit, where my attention is already in another box. And so when Ashley is talking, there's times that I don't even hear her because my attention's in this box. Now, when she gets my attention, I'm trying to figure out what to do with this information. And I need to give her kind of like a response. And so I'm simultaneously asking, what is the point of this conversation? Now, I don't know if the men are with me on this, but there is something going on when she's talking to me about something. So what is she trying to say to me? What is the problem that I need to solve? What do I need to fix? What box does this fit in? Why are we talking right now? Where are we going with this? Because I need to know where we're going with this information. I don't know if I want to go where this information is leading me. And so there's this thinking of, where does this fit? Now, I get a little bit uncomfortable when I'm out of my box. Now, here's another thing about this box. I cannot multitask very well. If I'm thinking about one thing, don't ask me to think about something different. Don't ask me to be over here when we're right here. So that's why men, in general, are not good multitaskers. I think we were designed differently to process information, to be focused on the task at hand. That's why, when a man is driving somewhere, they're reluctant to pull over to use the bathroom because they have the destination held in their mind. And so to detour, to go to the restroom, it's just not where they're going. And so it's tough to get them off track. So I don't know if you're still with me, but hopefully you're kind of understanding men in a sense that they have compartments in their thinking and how they process information. Now, what about women? And this is not just my opinion, but it's something that my wife has confirmed, and I think it's true. And this is something about their thinking and process, and it looks more like this. Like this, which is spaghetti. So men have waffle brains, and women have spaghetti brains. Now, I know this is oversimplistic, and so if you're easily offended, maybe just come back to this video when you've cooled yourself down. But hopefully you're with me. And I want to explain this. You see, women's thinking and how they process information looks like this. Everything is connected. When the sauce comes down, it kind of gets on more than one thing. And so she could be talking, about work, and then she can move to talking about family, talking about weather, and then talking about what's for dinner. And I'm like, whoa, slow down. How did you get from the weather to dinner? I'm trying to figure out, how did we get here? Where are we moving in this? It's moving from box to box. But for her, she says, it makes complete sense the way that I said this. Why can't you understand this? So women's brains are highly connective with how information links together. And so they can move from topic to topic without any sense of whiplash or disorientation. They're highly connective with information and emotions. And so this is important for men to understand because they may be hitting on something that's connected to a whole lot of other things, and there may be some emotional reactions that may catch men off guard, saying, why are you getting so heated about this, and whatnot. So just helping maybe to understand men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti, and that they process information and emotions very differently. So I've learned to sort of let her talk, and then I can kind of figure out what box that this is in. Now, if you want to see the difference clearly, ask your wife to look into her purse. Now, maybe that's bad advice, so you'll have to see if that's something she wants you to do. But have you ever looked inside a woman's purse? I mean, there's a lot in there. It's a complex assortment of things. They have everything. Now, my wife, she has a whole drugstore in there. She's got snacks, gum, and tissues. There's coupons, receipts, and change. And let's just be honest. I mean, she could travel around the world 3 times and still have things left over. Now, things tell you about thinking. Now, you can't read somebody's mind, but things tell you about someone's thinking, how they process, how they organize information. Now, I want you to look at what a man carries, their wallet, their tiny wallet compared to the purse. It's a fraction of what women think that they'll need. Now, why is this? Now, are women hoarders? No. Are men just unprepared? No. It's just women, I think, are more relational, so they have a different approach to things. Men are more simplistic, and so their thinking reflects that, and their things reflect that. So there are differences, yes, between men and women. However, men can learn to understand women by understanding that they process things differently. And women can learn to understand men by understanding that they process things very differently. Now, the final myth that I want to share with you is number 10, and it's, if marriage doesn't satisfy me, I'll leave. If my marriage doesn't satisfy me, I'll leave. Now, this is a myth, and it's a dangerous false belief because it undermines one of the most important things in marriage that we'll talk about in a moment. So if my marriage doesn't satisfy me, I'm out of here, I'll leave. If you have that thinking, it's a dangerous one because it'll lead to expectations being violated and also lead to behavior that is not Christ-like. Now, these 10 myths could have been extended. There's a lot more that people come to believe about marriage that's false because it's based on their own thinking or cultural understanding. We need to understand God's word. You see, myths matter because they influence both your expectations and behavior. But truth matters more because it regulates both our expectations and our behavior. So let's look at a few verses that help point us to the truth about marriage. Romans 12:2. Now I'm reading from the New Living Translation. It says, "Don't copy the behavior and custom of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Now, I want to read this verse again, but I'm going to change translations from the New Living Translation to the Passion Translation because I think it just pops a little bit more. Now, we're talking about marriages and relationships here, so listen to this verse again with that lens to see how it applies to marriages and relationships. "Stop imitating the ideals and opinions of the culture around you, but be inwardly transformed by the Holy Spirit through a total reformation of how you think. This will empower you to discern God's will as you live a beautiful life, satisfying and perfect in His eyes." In other words, he's saying stop living by these false sets of beliefs, these myths that are all around you on how you think things work. And instead, let your thinking be renewed and transformed by knowing the truth of God's word. So if we're gonna make marriage work, we need to have this key of dismissing the myths. Now, the second one I want to bring to you today is this key of counting the cost. We need to count the cost when we get into marriage. Jesus gave us some important truths about building that I wanted to point you to. In Luke 14, starting in verse 28, he says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower." So Jesus is talking about building. So underline or circle the word build. He's talking about building a tower, which is an illustration of what goes on into anything that you wish to build. It could be like a business, it could be a relationship, a marriage, but anything that you want to build and you want it to last. Now, won't you first sit down and estimate the cost? So underline the word cost. Building has a cost to see if you have enough money to complete it. For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you. saying this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. So Jesus is saying here that anything that you wish to build includes a cost. And when it comes to marriage, the cost is commitment. Now, commitment comes in two forms: things that I include and things that I exclude. Things that I include and things that I exclude. That's commitment. When we give our lives to Christ, you are now including God into your life, where before you were excluding God from your life. Now that you've committed your life to Christ, there are things that you're going to include and some things and some people that you're going to exclude. And the same is true in marriage. When you commit yourself in a marriage, you are now including your spouse in your life decisions. It's no longer just about you. And you are excluding those you previously had a relationship with. You don't bring them into marriage. There's things that you exclude and things that you include. Now, the way that this starts is through something called the vows. Vows represent commitments that you are making to your spouse about your future decisions. Repeating the vows is not just something that is a traditional thing you include in the ceremony, but it's a statement of each other's commitment to include and exclude. Now, we'll have like the groom and the bride, when I do ceremonies, they'll each repeat their vows. And sometimes they write their own vows, but I also provide vows for them to read. So it'll go, groom, so-and-so, and taking the bride, so-and-so, to be your wife. Do you so promise to honor, to love, and to cherish her in sickness and in health, in poverty as in wealth, in hardship as in blessing, until death alone shall part you? And then the groom, says, I do. And then the bride repeats it and she says, I do. But the vows, they go through pretty much, any and every circumstance that you may face as a marriage couple. And then it ends with this phrase, until death alone shall part you. Now, it's not until another person comes along shall we part. Or it's not until I don't feel like I'm in love with you anymore, then we shall part. No, it's till death do us part. Now, some get married by a judge in a court. And so their vows are made in a legal setting. And many get married in a church by a minister. Thus, their vows are made legally and divinely before God. So the vows aren't just words, but they are statements of commitment before man and God and each other. There is a cost, and the cost of marriage starts with these vows. Now, you may be saying, Pastor, what does that mean? Does that mean that all marriages need to go until death? Well, I'm not here to talk about every exception and every situation. There are a few. There are exceptions like domestic violence, infidelity, and the other spouse's decision. But the normal situation that we'll find ourselves in are not these exceptional or extreme situations. Most of these are normal situations that are hard and difficult, and it's up to us to have a commitment and to count the cost. So once we dismiss the myths about marriage, when we stop living through those false sets of beliefs, our next step is to count the cost and to go all in to our marriage with commitment. If we're going to make our marriage work, we need to be all in and commit. So how do you commit to your marriage? Well, I'm going to give you 8 super quick ways to commit to your marriage. And if you miss any of these, they're going to be in the notes on YouTube or online. And so you can review these later and figure out how to take action on them. But number 1 is this, is to remove the escape thoughts, clauses, and conversations. You need to just eliminate anything that gives you a way out. If you're saying, if she does this, then I will leave. Or if this happens in our marriage, then I'll leave. And there may be some things that you're like, yeah, but you don't understand, Pastor. This is important to me. But you see, that kind of thinking, it almost destroys your marriage before it even begins, because you're already thinking that it's going to dissolve. You're already thinking of a way out. And so how can you be committed if you're thinking of a way out? Number 2 is to remove the influence of anything draining your attention or affection. Now, men typically, when they're having marriage problems or problems in one area, they will transfer their attention to something else that is working. So like that waffle illustration, men will tend to go to like work to make things feel like they're better. And so they can't control their relationship. They can't seem to get that to work. So they'll turn their attention to something else. And it will drain away the attention that they need to put on their marriage. And for women, they tend to drain their emotions through emotional affairs or through other things that they can kind of feel and have a connection with. And so they're not feeling the connection in marriage, so they'll go to these substitutes or these other things that'll kind of drain away the affection that they need to turn toward their marriage. So we need to just remove those influences that are draining our attention and affection. Number 3 is to remember your vows. You know, maybe you wrote your vows, or maybe the pastor provided you those vows. But remember those vows, those statements that you made to one another, because those are the things that are requiring commitment in today. Number 4 is to elevate commitment over emotions. You know, we're going to have emotions that are up and down. And if we live by emotions alone, we're going to just wreck our marriage, because sometimes we're not going to feel the love. Sometimes we're not going to feel like the other person is connecting or loving us like they should, or meeting our needs. So if you're relying on emotions too much, you're going to end up bailing on your marriage too soon. So we need to elevate commitment over our emotions and say, this is what I'm committed to do. I'm not going to let the other person and my emotions control my commitment. Number 5 is to adjust your attitudes about relationship problems that arise. You know, sometimes it's just an adjustment to how you're seeing the problem. Early on in our marriage, Ashley and I would attack each other. We would attack the person instead of the problem. So we would do this through this thing called blaming. You know, it's a great tool, isn't it? You know, everything that's wrong in something in our marriage, in my life, I can attribute it to another person and shift this responsibility and this guilt upon another person. And it's something that's very tempting in marriage to do. And so Ashley and I would do that often, and when we'd have a problem that would arise in our marriage. And it took us a while to figure out that, no, we need to attack the problem, not the person. We need to begin to eliminate blame. And so we began to do this by erasing words like never or always. We would criticize one another, and we'd always say, you always do this, or you never do this. So what we've learned to do is just to eliminate that and say, you did this, and I feel this way. And that kind of helped us to understand the problem instead of saying it's something that they're always doing. There's also something that we realized about some problems, and that's some problems are solvable. You know, there is a solution to them, and we need to work to solve them and resolve them. But then there are some problems that are unsolvable. You know, we just can't quite figure out how to solve it. And so we need to understand it about problems, that some are worth more of our time and attention, while others will remain until a solution becomes apparent. Number 6 is to identify and adopt a common goal and exercise teamwork. You know, I think for a marriage to work, you both need to be headed the same direction. I think of the example that Jesus used of being unequally yoked. Yoked was like 2 oxen being in the same yoke that would tie around their neck, so that they would both be going the same direction. I think it's important in a marriage to be equally yoked as much as possible, to agree on common goals and work on those as a team. Number 7 is to demonstrate your commitment through investment. So this is something that we need to understand about marriage, is that it's not just, about saying I'm committed all the time, but it's about demonstrating that through investing. So this would be taking your spouse out for a date, or prioritizing time with your spouse. And sometimes that's going to cost money. Sometimes it may be going to a conference or a retreat or a camp. But we need to understand that part of commitment is an investment in the relationship into becoming a better team. Number 8, and finally, is to communicate your commitment in words. Words are important. It's not so much just what you say, but it's also how you say it. Proverbs 18:21 in the Message translation says, Words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. You choose. So what does it say there? It says words kill or words give life. There's power in your tongue. There's power in the words that you choose to speak to your spouse. You know, it's not just what you say, but it is how you say it. You know, for example, saying, I can't stand you. I wish you weren't here. I wish you weren't a part of my life. And you can almost sense like the room kind of changed when I said it like that. You could kind of feel almost like this dark cloud entering the room, and the temperature and the weather has changed. And I don't know if you felt the harshness in words like that, but also consider the opposite. Honey, I really appreciate you. Thank you for putting in the extra work to make our home a little bit more like heaven. Did you feel the difference? See, words kill or words give life. And I'll tell you something, if you get that one thing right in your marriage, you know, using your words correctly, using your words gently, thinking about what you say before you say it, saying, I want to give life in my marriage, it will radically shift and radically improve the temperature in your relationship. Now change not only what you say, but how you say it. Use words that bring life. So as we close today, I've given you guys two keys. You know, dismiss the myth, but also to count the cost. And so I have some discussion questions for you that you can do at home with your spouse or someone that you're in relationship with. And if you're single or you know your partner's just not with you, you can just take these and begin to answer these yourself. You know, maybe grab a pen and a piece of paper and write out your responses and kind of make a journal entry here. But I want to give you guys about 5 minutes to have a discussion right at home. You can discuss what I've talked about, some of the myths and some of the things that about counting the cost, or you can answer these questions. But they're going to be up on the screen, and then we're going to go and close out our service. All right, thank you for joining me today for part 2 of Making Marriage Work. That's it for our service today. Thanks for joining us online. If you haven't already, you can click the subscribe button on YouTube so you don't miss a video. You can also find us on Facebook. Just like our page, and you can stay up to date on what's happening at the church. Happy Father's Day to all of our fathers, and have a great rest of your week.